I would like to extend my sympathies to the families and friends of the remarkably courageous Emma Vic Fahuna, Oireachtas Garawa Hanam Jeelish. Cancorla, here we are, last Cancorla, here we are again, the third budget of Fine Gael, the Independent Alliance and Independence. And what does this government have to show for it? An ongoing housing and homelessness crisis with 10,000 people homeless and 100,000 people on the social housing list, and unaffordable rental and purchase prices in our cities. A higher education sector which is struggling after years of underinvestment. Cost of living is going up in every way for families, for older people and students, healthcare, schools, childcare, not to mention housing. And we have a capital city that grinds to a halt every day, gridlocked. And on Monday, we saw a terrifying report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which revealed to us how dangerous our course is as a country and as a world. This is where we are. Monday's report wasn't a wake-up call. Monday's report was a siren, a screeching alarm, which you can't ignore. And yet, all the evidence seems to be that this is exactly what government intends to do. A stubborn refusal to listen to a reality that is staring them in the face and screaming. If there is one thing we can say for certain about Fine Gael and the Independent Alliance, it is that they are terrified of real change. They are terrified of system change. Reform is not something they have any time for. But the report on Monday showed that we can't keep going along the same road, and government needs to accept that fact. And yet yesterday, it took the Minister 55 minutes into his speech before he substantively mentioned climate action, in the section right after betting. I think that states very clearly where this government's priorities lie. There are many terms we associate with how Fine Gael wishes to talk about the economy. Prudence is one of them. They talk about prudence all the time and condescendingly accuse deputies on this side of the House of not being prudent, not dealing with reality. But this budget does not display prudence. It has populism at its very heart. It was very clear after a report on Monday that the ones ignoring reality is the government itself. On housing, the Minister has again proven that the only thing this government recycles is its announcements. Yesterday, the Minister announced an increase of 10,000 homes to be built next year. But this increase will only be 2,100 homes, as the other nearly 8,000 houses had already been announced under Rebuild in Ireland. And today in the Dublin Inquirer it's reported that what the government considered to be an affordable housing scheme, and what they were working on for 2 years before it was shelved, is a scheme which would have been based on giving cash subsidies to landlords. Remarkably, this government is still convinced that the private market will fix this crisis. That can be seen in the announcement of £1.25 billion for delivery of 10,000 new social homes in 2019, which seems to include rentals and acquisitions. And therefore, given that the rent assistance programmes cost £950 million in 2018 and are increasing every year by £150 million, it seems very likely that the additional £121 million will just cover rent inflation for current HAP tenancies. The very fact that the HAP programme has been government's most successful aspect of Rebuild in Ireland, combined with further tax relief for landlords in yesterday's budget, shows exactly where Fine Gael's priorities lie, with landlords and not with tenants. They are going back to the landlords time and time again with more giveaways, in the mistaken belief that this is a long-term solution to the housing and rental crisis. But this approach has failed for 7 years straight. So I simply don't understand why the government think it's going to work this time. What the government declares a success in terms of the HAP is lost in the reality that every day 50 new people or families enter into rental distress and need to avail of the scheme. With rents going up and up, including by more than the 4% annual cap, which is not adequately enforced, and no real security of tenure for many renters, it's entirely a landlord's market out there. And it is because of this that it is tenants who are the ones entering into rental distress in their droves, as the government refuses to take steps to properly strengthen their rights. There is still little to no detail on what's going to be built on the state lands that are being made available, and nothing to convince us that the government is turning away from the market-led approach to any degree that will see the scale of home building we need. The announcement of a scheme for houses affected by Mica in Donegal, while welcome for those affected, only highlights the government's unwillingness to deal with the scope of the issue of legacy defects. Where is the scheme, Minister, for those, due to the reckless actions of cowboy builders, have been forced to rectify defects, fire safety and structural defects? Those who, through no fault of their own, have been left with dangerous homes and substantial bills. Instead, we get a true Fine Gael way of tackling the problem, dealing with one small aspect of it and leaving everyone else out in the cold. You can't pick and choose who you help based on the minister who lobbies the loudest. It's not fair on those people, the people that you refuse to meet, Minister. Agus taspánan an budget seo aspa ulmhéineachta an rialtas I le pobal na Gaeltachta. Is cúis dímo nach bhfuil ach 5 milliún sa bhreis ar cur leis an Gaeilge agus an Gaeltach agus muid I mlín na Gaeilge. Níl éon rud ann faoi géir chéim tithiaachta na Gaeltachta, agus níl ach 1.5 milliún de údarás na Gaeltachta I naric scrad asal don bhéad atá tastal chun infrastructure chuí a thógáil sa Gaeltacht. In mental health, while it was positive to hear yesterday in the Chamber that there would be an increase of 84 million in mental health investment after looking at the budget document itself, I can only see 55 million in extra spend outlined. Where is the discrepancy of 29 million? We need clarity on this, and we need clarity on the breakdown of spend. Time and time again, and Deputy Rabbit over there will tell you, we are members of the Future of Mental Health Care Committee. We just cannot get to the bottom of where money is allocated to mental health services or where it is being spent. It is essential that the money is being spent on developing services, increasing staffing and cutting waiting times. We need accountability and clarity, both in the amount allocated and how it is allocated. In education, yes, there is an increase in the capitation grant by 5%. But for schools, it equates to just 4 cents per student per day, and continues to leave schools well below the capitation grant levels of 2010, leaving the voluntary contribution in place, burdening parents with the increasing costs of not only sending their children to school, but now they have to keep the schools afloat. The increase in teaching numbers, and particularly the increase in funding for additional special needs assistance, is to be welcomed. But that feeling fades away as soon as you realise that these increases only just cover the very basic needs out there. This isn't an investment for the future. This isn't putting focus on education. This is just barely keeping up. And things are even worse to third level, because the increases there are not even enough to keep up with the growing demand. The additional 57 million in current funding is entirely and absolutely inadequate. We are less than 3 years away from the Castle Report's first major benchmark, as an additional 600 million per annum from 2021 is required to keep the higher education sector afloat. And yet, I heard the Minister for State for Education yesterday announce that this budget, and I will quote, will change the landscape of third-level education in Ireland, and they have listened to all the voices in this sector. I'm slightly dumbfounded by how out of touch the Minister is. The Union of Students in Ireland have declared that they are extremely disappointed in the budget, saying the budget does little to nothing for students. The Irish Universities Association said that it's patent nonsense for the Minister to continue talking about having the best education system in Europe by 2026, while presiding over a funding regime that only provides a fraction of the funding per student of those best countries in Europe. And it also said that it is a serious cause of concern that the government has not prioritised the education of the future workforce of the country. The Irish Federation of Universities Teachers criticised the budget for falling far, far short of the resources needed under the Castle's report. The Teachers Union of Ireland called the investment in higher education in Budget 2019 woefully inadequate. So you have to wonder, who exactly did the Minister engage with or listen to? if she didn't listen to the universities, she didn't listen to the students, and she didn't listen to the teachers? Who exactly did she listen to? This government needs to stop seeing education as a cost, and it needs to see it as an investment in our future. And to truly invest in our children's future, we need to value our teachers and ensure that they get equal pay for equal work. But, as with its actions in relation to climate action, this government seems uninterested in thinking about our future. This government is only interested in what is popular right now. This budget is the indication of a government being way off course. This government continues to insist that we are on the right path when it comes to climate change. But the reality is they don't care. And apathy is much more dangerous than denial when it comes to climate change. In the aftermath of Monday's IPCC report, this budget was an opportunity to be at the forefront, to lead in the climate action that is so badly needed. Instead, you should hang your heads in shame, as that lack of leadership is putting our children's future at risk. This will not be remembered as a budget for our society, for equality, for our children, for our environment, but as a missed opportunity and a dangerous step in the wrong direction by a government blind to the biggest challenge facing us all.